years ago.
Rich, you have a plethora of like characters on your show.
It it's crazy, and I think there are two approaches that we take to each character, pretty much. At least to the characters of season three, both Meryl Streep's character and I'm blanking on her name right now. Why am I here? Did I not write notes? Oh, sorry, you'll edit that out. Loretta, but for Meryl Streep's character, Loretta Durkin, um, the research for that was more. They didn't tell us much about it, except that she lived in a tiny little sort of one bedroom economy, in an old school New York way. And she had been a struggling artist and actor for her entire career. Now she's in her early 70s. And so where that was the let's make this New Yorker a New Yorker. And how New Yorky can she be? Well, she sort of thinks of herself as the mayor of her block, but she's not, and no one else accepts her as being the mayor of her block in that way. But she is very much into like zero plastic, low waste, and healthy and eating, and she's very healthy about everything in her life, and very sort of honest, and not quite a hoarder, but everything is special to her, and has been chosen significantly through her entire. She's lived in this apartment for 40 years. So that's one half of it. The other half of it is because the show is such is so much fun. We probably have 40 Easter eggs in her apartment to Meryl Streep's career. So we have like an ottoman that's burlap, and it is made from a Kenyan coffee bag because out of Africa she was a coffee heiress. We have a million little notes and all over her set. We have, and then we also made her very much sort of like a women of New York and an artist, a female artist of New York, sort of centric kind of character. So we found this watercolor artist who paints, New York sort of like typical sort of touristy things. And one of her Broadway marquees that she watercolored was for the musical The Prom, which is a movie that Meryl starred in 2 years after it was on Broadway. So like of course, that's like we had to work all of this in. So that's the sort of the start is like, okay, who's this character in New York? And with Paul Rudd's character, I guess, is sort of like the only line we heard in the script from him about his apartment was they break into his apartment and it is a Planet Hollywood to himself. And I'm like, oh God. That was like first week was like the Google slideshow of, okay, now we have to have all the movie posters, all the movies. We have to create the entire catalog for this guy. And then, of course, we dove in and also gave Paul all of those little Easter eggs that he just walked in. And he and Meryl walked through their sets the same day. And they were like, you spent a lot of time and money on this, didn't you? And I'm like, well, we had plenty of time because like there were permanent sets, but we didn't get to them until like episode 4 or 5. So we had a lot of time to get into their spaces and into their heads. But every element was, his famous character is the Cobra, which is that huge Cobra sculpture in the entryway as you pull it, and everything else in that house was, snake scale, or snake skin. It was all based on that, or the ideas of what a successful, Ben Glenroy would have in his apartment from Ben Glenroy as a 22-year-old when he first moved to New York or first moved to LA and struggling and starving. So it was all that sort of late 90s, Calvin Klein home furniture and stuff like that, Casa Armani furniture. And it was a lot of like, it was very, very dated, sort of, you walk in and you're like, it's not new. And this guy has sort of a bad sense of like taste. But
he loves it.
He's really into
it. And it's the stuff that was cool when he was aspiring.
Yeah. And when you crack that code and everyone walks in and they're like, oh my God, this is so silly. You can't help but laugh because everyone's giggling with you, and and he's Cobra. Come on, like how more stupid does it need to be? It's kind of great. Yeah. So it's basically the script, obviously, and then figuring out who these people are in New York, but then definitely tailored to the people who are sort of starring, in these roles, and they love it and know it's made with love and a lot of personality, and it still fits the character in that way that. And it makes it, and something else, because it's a mystery show. right? So every viewer is thinking, oh my God, is this a
What does
clue?
that mean?
What
Right.
does it mean? Where is it going? And how do we get there? And then that just heightens the sort of the joy of watching and the joy of rewatching. And it just sort of works naturally hand in hand. You know, the script versus the personalization.
By the way, I almost didn't want to talk to Rich again because I've talked to him before and I've talked to his showrunner, and it's like the best show to ever work on, and everybody's happy and it's a great show. Everybody has fun and they had time and they had this and they have Meryl Streep and blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
It's
yo,
it's
that sounds great. Like, I'm
it,
dying.
but it was my first show after COVID, right?
Yeah.
And every show has 2 or 3 or 12 people attached to it. You know, you never know what's going to disappear in the ether of streaming. You know, you never know, oh, it's a small budget thing. Can't you do this on the same budget as that show? And I'm like, these are millionaire apartments. And that was literally, a mobile home on the bayou. Like they're like literally. And that was a conversation I had to have with the showrunner in season 1. I'm like, there's a very big difference here. And Steve Martin is an art collector. So it has to have a little bit of an essence of the real, that he knows what he's doing, and there's a name attached to every piece on that set in a way that, Martin Short's character just stole everything, so from other productions. So it's all broken and chipped and dinged, and no one cares about that. But that's the give and take that you have to have, with production, with the showrunner, and when you can convince them visually in your presentation to them, that's the toughest part, right? Is convincing them that this versus this is really worth that much money.
Yeah, and making sure they get it.
And they get it. That's the toughest part.